So when Halloween Kills came out, my first viewing experience of that film was on Peacock, and I was really disappointed, but I eventually went out to check it out in theaters because I really enjoyed it. Now I'm wishing I got COVID this time. What's going on, everybody? Today we're going to be discussing Halloween Ends. The saga ends for Laurie and Michael, and we're about to see if this final chapter lives up. Now, I wasn't a big fan of the 2018 Halloween film. Over time, I've kind of grown to appreciate it. I'll pop it in every single time during the Halloween season, and I was actually a big fan of Halloween Kills. I know a lot of people were not a fan of that film, but I actually enjoyed it for what that film was, and it actually got me a lot of joy. Now, I was really excited to see how this whole trilogy was going to end. It is the confrontation between Michael and Laurie, and we're about to see them go head to head, and boy, was this a colossal mess. I was not a big fan of this film, and so we're going to get started with a couple of the positives, because there are a couple of things that I actually did enjoy about this film, and there's a laundry list of things that I really did not enjoy about this film. So starting off with the positives that I will give this film, I really enjoyed a lot of the cinematography for this film. There are moments in this film where the film is shot in the dark, so it's hard to see a couple of things, but when it is in the daylight and the way that they use colors, I think that was a little bit more effective. There were a couple of great moments of tension, and I think the opening scene of this film was actually very interesting and a very compelling in a very sadistic and fun way that I really enjoyed seeing, and it was very shocking to see because I knew a couple of directions that this film was going to take going into this film, and I was very interested to see in which way they were going to be taking those things. Now the director has come out and said that this film will be taking place a few years after Halloween Kills, and they were going to try to include the pandemic in this film. And I'm not sure when Halloween 2018 takes place, but I don't think there was a really big significant time jump because this film takes place in 2019, and even though the pandemic took place in 2020, it really doesn't have that big of a role in this film. Michael has been luring in the shadows. He has not been seen for a long while. He's been in hiding, and that was one of the biggest disappointments that I had with this film. There was not a lot of Michael Myers in this film, and that was really disappointing to see. A majority of this film is basically a love story. There is really no confrontation between Michael or Laurie. She doesn't go out to find him. She's basically secluded in her own home. She's writing a novel about her experiences, and Allison has moved on from the things that happened in the last film. She works at the hospital, and she meets a guy named Corey Cunningham, and I don't think his performance was bad. It was just a direction that they took his character that I was not a big fan of. This film is tailor-made to be the final confrontation between Michael and Laurie. This is what this whole trilogy has been leading up to, and it just leaves off on a sour note because you're just stuck in this love story that I was not a big fan of. I was not a big fan of the direction that they took Allison in. They made her a little bit more bitchy and a little bit more high-strung in this film than what she was in the other ones. When you take a look at her in Halloween 2018, she has a really nice relationship between her and her grandmother that is very conflicting because her mom doesn't really want her to be around her. And then in Halloween Kills, you see what happens to her mom at the end of that film. Everything that happened in the last film is basically really not all that relevant to this film. A lot of it is just passed by and just forgotten about. You have Kylie Richards that comes back. She was one of the survivors of the original films, and she comes back in this film for a not that big of a significant role. Time jump, a lot of the kills in this film really weren't, even though some of them were really well done, it was really disappointing because the outcome of what happens in this film is just not all interesting and all not fascinating. It was just awful. It really diminished what Michael is, and it just basically took a different turn that you're not really expecting it to be unless you've heard things about this film that will come into play, and depending on how you feel about those things, that is going to determine how you feel about this film, because there are a lot of turns in this film that I was not a fan of. It takes a long while before we actually get to see Michael, and the things that they do with Michael in this film kind of make him feel irrelevant to what's going on, because there are a lot of cartoonish characters, especially a couple of bullies. There's a lot of awkward humor in this film. I was not a big fan of the humor in this film. It was just awful. A lot of people in my theater got a big chuckle out of a lot of them. Some of them hit for me. A lot of it really just felt forced and really felt cheesy. It was just not that well done. Going into this film, I was really excited to see the confrontation between Michael and Laurie, and once we got to that final confrontation that you see in the trailers, it really left me unsatisfied, because it is not the biggest and it's not the greatest fight that you will ever see. There are some blows here and there that will get your attention, but the final fight between Michael and Laurie really does not have the impact that you actually want to have, because it is relegated by everything that happened before the fight. Everything that happens in the first two acts leading up to the fight is really something that really turned me off and really didn't have the emotional impact that you want from this final confrontation, because you're following different characters and people that you are not fascinated with. That just really left a really sour note. That just left a sour taste in my mouth, and by the time that we got to the final confrontation, I was just not really into it. I was not really invested in the fight between Laurie and Michael. I was not really getting invested in anything. A lot of these characters are dumbed down just a little bit, and I was not a fan of a lot of these characters. But overall, my final thoughts on this film is, wouldn't recommend it. I wouldn't recommend that you check it out in theaters. Maybe if you're curious about this film, stream it on Peacock. Otherwise, avoid this film, mostly because it is not going to be the movie that you think it's going to be. But those are my thoughts on Halloween Ends. Have you guys checked it out? Did you like it? Did you not? Go ahead and drop your thoughts in the comments below. If you like this video, go ahead and click that like and subscribe button so you don't miss out on more reviews. Click that bell notification so you get notified every single time that a video pops up. And I'll catch you guys on the flip side.